Welcome back. uh, Today is Wednesday, September 27th, 2023. It's about 7:38 in the morning, and we've moved to the fourth cell. In this fourth section, there's rotation that started on September 15th. Right now the temperature is about 69 degrees Fahrenheit with 80% humidity. There's lots of dew. My pants are soaking wet because of the dew. The grass here is pretty decent. Well, under the trees it's not so good. But I believe this grass that we're looking at, this is cool season grass that's growing. And it's growing pretty well. But out under the goatweed we get some pretty good grass too. I should tell you that I think I've identified the plant from yesterday's video. Let me go show it to you. It's just over here. So I did some plant ID on it, and it looks like it matches the description of a plant called the thoroughwort. And the thoroughwort is native to this area. There's different kinds. The one particular example that I was looking at, I believe it's called tall thoroughwort. Let's see if we can find it. It was like 6 feet tall. And where did it go? It was over here somewhere. It was like 6 feet tall. And I looked at the other plants and they look like they're different kinds of... Oh, it got knocked over. That's why. Cows doing their job a little bit too efficiently. Yeah, this is where it was. Let me pick it up so you can see how tall it is. Yeah, it's at least 5.5 feet tall. But yeah, it's called thoroughwort. The only notes I could find on it is that it tends to grow in disturbed soil. So this certainly was disturbed because of the fire that we had last year around July. There wasn't much growing here for a long time. This particular area that I'm standing in was covered with a wood pile. So people build wood piles. When they cut trees down and tend to forest, they generally pile the wood up, and the reason why is it provides shelter for various critters like rabbits and things like that. And that tends to be things that people want to see on their land. They could burn it, but they'd rather have critters, and if that means sacrificing a small tiny part of their pasture to have a giant wood pile, and that's what it is. But there was a big wood pile here, so not a lot of grass was growing here for a long time. So the thoroughwort seems to have taken over. The problem with the thoroughwort is it is a perennial, so it apparently will die. Will not die. It'll keep growing back. And the way to treat it or take care of it is just to cut it down. And I'm just going to let it grow because it is a tiny part of my pasture. I'm going to see what happens with it. It's one of these native species that has been here since forever and probably will be forever. Until somebody comes through and bakes the soil, digs up the top foot of soil, cooks it in a kiln, and kills everything that's in there, which isn't going to happen. So anyway, tall thoroughwort is what I think it is, and other kinds of thoroughwort. There's like 6 different species of it, and they're known to form hybrids too. So this area I'm at was one of the parts of the field that was totally burned. Thankfully, there wasn't a lot of grass. I had been rotationally grazing despite the fact there was no grass, and so there wasn't a lot of dead grass to burn. But despite that, the fire did travel. Oh, there's Doggy. Hey, Snowball. Oh, I got news. You guys might like to hear this. Something's living down there. There's a hole. Yeah, something is making that their home. Anyway, news. My dog, Nutmeg, seems to be pregnant. Her teats are getting big, and she's exhibiting strange behavior. So I'm going to try to keep an eye on her and keep her in the pasture so she can have those puppies in the pasture. And I got to do some research on when we can wean the puppies, because my plan is to wean the puppies immediately, like the day that I can wean them, and put them in with the sheep so they bond with the sheep. So, and the sheep bond with them. But I need sheepdogs that are bonded with sheep, not dogs that want to come home and say hi to my children. And we're going to resist basically all forms of, here's some more of that thoroughwort. It's also called bone set. I don't know why it's called bone set, but the site on Missouri talking about this stuff suggests that all of these plants had a medicinal use. That's all it says. So maybe something in here helps you heal bones more quickly. Maybe it's high in calcium or something like that, vitamin K or something like that. Anyway, yeah, so my dog is what's right? Bred, I guess, is the more agricultural term. So we'll see what kind of puppies we get and when they come. Hopefully it's Hindungi, which Hindungi is her, they were in the same litter. So hopefully she bred with him, so we get more dogs like him. I really like the size and the temperament of Hindungi, and I really want more of him. So hopefully that goes well. So the sheep and the cows aren't going to eat the thoroughwort because apparently it's very bitter. They don't like it. So other animals might, though. You know, they said the same thing about goatweed, but I've seen cows go and eat goatweed. You know. Anyway, let's see what else we can talk about. We have lots of grass. Oh, the temperature. So I checked the weather report, and it seems Saturday it's going to get up to 99 degrees. We are getting blasted with more heat here on the last day of September. And previously I told you that October 4th we expected a lot of rain. Well, that shifted to, I believe, October 6th, a Saturday. Whew. So we have to wait till that to get the rain. After this heat blast on Saturday, though, this coming Saturday, September 30th, we're going to see more cooler weathers, hopefully in the 80s. That's what we were promised, is weather in the 80s, but we're getting weather in the 90s. Which, you know, I could complain about that, but I really can't, because it probably just gave me a couple more weeks of forage on my summer grasses here, the warm season grasses. So, well, speaking of which, as I was coming down the field, excuse me, Mr. Bull, as I was coming down the field, putting up the wire, I was a bit dismayed with myself. And so this is the part of the pasture that we haven't even grazed yet. Last time we were here was 3 weeks ago, more or less. I know we spent a couple extra days in this part of the pasture. But as you can see, the grass looks like it really hasn't recovered. And if I bring the cows in here again, they're just going to eat the same grass they've eaten again and cause some damage to the grass. So really, I shouldn't, you know, technically I probably shouldn't be going in here. And so this is against advice that I've been given by various rotational grazing type people. The one that I think is most adamant about making sure the field's fully recovered before you graze it again is the fellow up from Virginia, who's famous for building little chicken tractors, the small ones. I can't remember his name also. Joe Salatin. So he's the one that he explains you got to let the grass recover. When the leaves are pointy again, then you can put the cows back in the pasture. And Greg Judy, I don't know his method, but I think he undergrazes a ton. And so he always has like places that he can move the cows that are ready to graze. Some of the pastures, like he comes back to it like in 6 months. So he said, like, I haven't been here since 6 months ago. And so that shows me that he has a lot of options. And that's one way I could do it, is I could just like designate half of my pasture for, you know, the 21-day rotation. and then leave the other half alone for 6 months and use that as a sort of stockpile. Okay, I have a point here. And I'm going to try to get to it before the cows get to it. So this is what I've been using as my stockpile back here. This is the back 20. And I'd say it's more or less recovered. There's just not a lot of grass there. You know, so it is good backstop if I wanted to take them off this rotation. But here's the punchline. Look at that. That's a tuft of grass that's probably at least 2 feet tall, if not a little more. And the blade tips are flat. They're not pointy. Some of the blade tips are pointy. The pointy tips indicate that it's fully grown, it's ready to harvest. So I'm not too concerned about it because I think that, you know, yes, you're going to find spots, like if we zoom in here, it's like, oh, it's not ready, it's not ready. But then you just move a couple inches to the right and you're like, yeah, it's ready. Okay. And so you kind of got to take into account the full totality of the pasture. At least this is my thinking. And my thinking, of course, is subject to revision and what's the nullification. My advice isn't permanent. So yeah, so I showed you that one part of the pasture. Look at this. That's ready to graze, 100%. You know, that grass is begging to get grazed right now. And so, you know, we just move a little bit to the left or right, and the situation looks a lot different. So, and then when I look, kind of zoom out, and I kind of look in the distance at the grass that I can see. I can't see the grass up there because the goatweed's blocking it, but the grass that I can see, and it looks like about 80% of it is ready to be grazed. So I think we're fine right now, at least in this section. The next section, I don't even want to look at it. I'll be honest with you. I'm so worried that it's not ready. My plan is if I go to the next section and it's not ready, then I'll probably just turn the cows out there for a day and then go to the next section. And then if this rotation cuts short, then we're going to spend a few days in the back 20. Just a few days, not a week or anything like that. But yeah, no, that's a strategy that I'm aware of. You know, the advice to not graze until the grass is pointy again. I've always found it kind of silly to try and time your rotations. And again, remember, you're talking to somebody who's only been doing this for 2 years. You know, so I've always found it kind of silly. The advice that I was given, I think it was from one of Greg Judy's books, is to keep the seed heads off by grazing more rapidly. And I found that advice to be kind of silly because the cows can only eat so much in a day. And when your field, okay, so you start with the dead field because you haven't been rotationally grazing. And then all of a sudden spring starts and all the grass starts growing at the same time. And you're like, okay, I got to wait a little bit longer till it gets a little bigger, you know. And then you're like, okay, now it's time to graze. I have to graze everything all at the same time. It doesn't work, right? Because the cows can only eat so much in a day. And so no matter what you do, there's going to be some spots you hit where you're like, I timed it exactly right. Other spots you're going to hit too early, and other spots you're going to hit too late. It's just the nature of how time works. And unfortunately, I can't control the weather such that, you know, one section of my pasture gets warmer weather before the other does, and so it can start growing earlier. So my advice to myself and to others who are challenged with this conundrum, and I tried my best to, you know, follow the advice and, okay, do we have pointy tips and all this kind of stuff, is honestly, when you're starting out rotationally grazing, I think it's more important to just start rotating, you know. And if you don't know what grass is supposed to look like, if you've never seen grass grow up to your knees or beyond, you know, or you're like, I don't know anything about seed heads, or I don't know when it's ready to graze, you'll learn just by doing it. So that's kind of my advice, is just do it and learn and see what works for you and your animals and your pasture, okay? And I would avoid making sudden or drastic changes. partially because it's hard to tell whether those changes were beneficial, especially when the weather is always changing, right? And so if I do an experiment where, 3 weeks of the summer I do this and 3 weeks I do that, and I say, oh, that second one turned out a lot better, is it because I was doing something different that it's better, or is it because the weather happened to be different for those 3 weeks? So like my southern half of my pasture is much worse than the northern half, right? Thankfully, I've basically kept the same regime for both the northern and southern halves. So I can tell you definitively that it's not anything I'm doing, right? I've done the same thing to the north and south. What I think it is when they were in the southern half, the weather conditions were very different, or vice versa, And so like when they were grazing in the north, the south didn't have a chance to recover, or something like that, right? And so I don't think that the difference between the two pastures has anything to do with my technique. There's other factors at play. And trying to sort out, how you should respond to those factors, that's an impossible problem to solve. There's certain problems in mathematics and science that just can't be solved. We know, we can prove to you that you can't solve those problems. And that's one of the problems. It sounds a lot like a problem that can't be solved. Give me the input of all the weather and all the forecasts, rainfall, soil patterns, blah, blah, blah. And, and then tell me what I'm supposed to do to graze that. That's not a problem that can be solved by anybody. And so the advice of just graze, just rotationally graze and see what happens. Because your brain does a fantastic job of finding patterns, even when patterns aren't there, right? Your brain, for better or for worse, your brain is a justification machine, right? Your brain sees something, and the immediate question the brain tries to solve is, why did it turn out that way? What's the cause of it? And your brain will look around for any kind of cause that makes any sense and sort through billions and billions of possible options and choose the one that seems to be the best. And you will latch onto that as the cause for the thing you're seeing, because that's what the brain does, right? So get your cows or animals rotating through your pasture and just watch, just look. You're out there twice a day, right? You're looking at the animals, you're looking at the grass in the pasture. You're going to start to put two and two together, right? You're going to see what works. Now, from time to time, you might want to change your tactics a little bit and get some advice like I did. I went to Jim not with the advice of how do I rotate my cows more successfully, but my question was, what kind of crops can I plant to supplement my rotationally grazing techniques, right? And Jim ended up telling me that probably the most important thing you can do is rotate every 21 days rather than every 60 days. So I made that change, and I think it's a very positive change. I've been doing this for the better part of the year now, right? I started in late spring, and I'm very happy with the results. And the other change too that this year I'm making is to follow Greg Judy's advice, where if you don't have grass, you can't graze it, right? Put the cows on a sacrificial area, feed them, hay them, whatever you need to do to keep them alive, keep them healthy. And then when the grass comes back, then you can graze again, right? And part of his advice also is the first signs of drought, sell your cows, right? Try to get ahead of the rush. The Shepherdess is another YouTube channel I watch. Last year, when the drought became increasingly obvious, there were lines for miles of cattlemen bringing their cows to sell them. And what was sad is some of the people were selling all of their cows. They weren't even keeping some of them back. They were just, I'm done. I can't do cattle anymore. They're broke, So they had lines of people selling their cows, following Greg Judy's advice, except they should have been there the month previous, because that's when the drought was starting. That's when it became increasingly clear there was a drought. And because they waited too long, they got a really bad price for their cows. Well, now that the grass is back, the price of cattle shot up because they want to buy their cows back. They want to put new cows on their pasture. They have grass. Well, that's a terrible way to run your business, to sell low and buy high, you know. So my decision was to ignore Greg Judy's advice, and I said, I'm just going to feed my cows. I'm going to dig into my bank account. I'm going to pull out some money and buy feed, because hay was too expensive, you know. And so, you know, $5,000 or $6,000 later, spring comes, right? And that's what I was willing to do. Was it worth it? I don't know. It was kind of an experiment. I learned a lot. But, you know, for my operation, will it make more money than if I had sold my cows low and tried to buy cows high? I think, for 30 cows, definitely, I think $5,000 or $6,000 was worth the price difference, you know. And had I calves to sell this year, I probably could have gotten a really good price for them, especially the heifer calves, right? Anyway, so yeah, just rotate the graze. Just do it and just start seeing what happens and start learning and finding out for yourself. Guys, have a great day. Take care and bye-bye.